All right. Can you all hear me? Not a whole lot. Not the few, the faithful today, right? So this is the summer doldrums, right? So we're glad you're here, and so we're on Exodus. You're going to need Bibles if you don't have them. So we're getting some parts for this in the next 2 weeks, and hopefully it'll be working again about 2 weeks from now. Hopefully. I'm betting on 3, but that two will be. I talked to him yesterday about it. So we're going to get a check written from the church and get some parts. And he said, hopefully we'll have the parts by next week, end of next week. Happy birthday, Harold. 93, huh? Awesome. When is your birthday? Today? The 1st. So we're a little bit late. But we'll sing you happy birthday in church. So we're on Exodus 20, and I think we're on, I think we are on You Shall Not Steal, which is verse 15. Right? You shall not steal. So that's a pretty easy one, you would think, right? Don't steal. Don't take what doesn't belong to you. Chapter 20, Exodus 20. So the commandments are found in 2 parts of the scriptures, Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy. What is it? Deuteronomy 2, I think. It's I could be wrong. I should know that. Let me look real quick. Deuteronomy 5. I'm sorry. I was close. Deuteronomy 5 is the 10 commandments. So Exodus 20, chapter 15, you shall not steal. So stealing, right? Stealing is, don't take, we're in Exodus 20. Exodus 20. I was just saying that the 10 commandments are also in Deuteronomy, but so you shall not steal is just, don't take what doesn't belong to you. What's that? Finders, keepers. Yeah, that doesn't work. That's not, don't go by that rule either. Right. So it's just a matter of, Luther talks about, you've kept this commandment when you have helped your neighbor keep their possessions. So he takes, so we're all guilty of this one too, right? We're all guilty of this one too. Carl had a good idea about putting the what was it? The venial. What we were talking. Well, I remember your email. What it was about changing. I liked it. Yeah, using the cardinal sins. I think would have been because it's all covered. It all covers them, right?
These are the actions. The cardinal sins are the motivation.
Yeah. I did like what you wrote there. So, certainly we want to be the motivation of not doing. You don't want to take something, and you want to help people keep their stuff. When you see it being taken, you speak up, right? Yeah.
Is this also a little bit about our contentedness with what God
Ooh.
when we're stealing, we're saying it's not. We're kind of playing God a little bit in that.
Yeah.
I think I should have that.
So the comment is it about contentedness, right? What God has given us, are we content with what we have versus stealing to have more? And I think there's some real truth to that. Um,
But that also falls under covetousness.
yeah, it's going to come under covetousness. I think that so that that end of the commandments and this one, I think they sort of all go together, right? I mean, certainly you're not taking what doesn't belong to you, and that applies when you covet, right? When you take your neighbor's stuff, which is also stealing, right? But then there's the desire for your neighbor's stuff, which is the coveting part. So we get sort of the big ones out of the way, and then like stealing, bearing false witness, coveting. You could lump all of those into one, into one group. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? You could lump them all in together. Yeah.
Well, I think Colin makes it motivation.
Yeah.
The commandment there, and all the coveting and all that, is trying to get us because thoughts precedes action.
Yeah.
And
Thoughts precede action, yeah.
Commandments are getting to that. Okay, these are very specific, murder, adultery, theft, and public, but the rest of it gets down to stop thinking about what your neighbor's got.
Yeah.
Because the more you think about that, the one dissatisfied you'll be with your own lot. And two, many people are inclined to think that he's got what I deserve to have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
therefore, I want to get it. Now, if your motive in looking at your neighbor saying, if I work a little harder, I think I can probably buy that.
Yeah, that's different.
Or whatever.
That might be different. Yeah.
So, but that's not coveting. The coveting gets really into the motivation of
Yeah.
he's got what I want.
Yeah. So Ben is saying coveting is the idea of your neighbor has what you want, or you think you deserve. I like the way you said that. I think I deserve this. Yeah, I think that's an attitude, right? I think I deserve this. I've often talked to the council about leasing me a Porsche, but that hasn't happened yet. So
They're really nice.
they're really nice. I mean, they're really nice. I mean,
You just can't fit all the youth for the trip.
I can't. Yeah, I can't fit all the youth but so yeah, that's a sinful desire. Coveting is certainly a sinful desire, which we're going to talk about.
We have offered you the donkey because Jesus.
Yeah. Patrick said they have offered me the donkey because that's what Jesus rode. So that's, what, I'd take a donkey. Take a donkey. Be a great pack animal for when I'm out west hunting, right? So it's hard to fit a donkey in a Porsche. That is true. The next one after you shall not steal is you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So this is probably the one that gets, this one's trouble, right? I mean, we probably break this one a lot. This is that don't gossip, right? This one, that's tough, right? Don't gossip because, boy, it's easy to, it's easy to, did you hear? Have you heard the news? Right. I mean, it's easy to go down that road. Right. And I'm just doing it out of love. Always like that one. Yeah. I'm just telling you my neighbor's deepest, darkest secrets out of love.
I had one not too long ago when the gal came up to me and she said, "Now don't tell anybody else."
Yeah.
She proceeded to tell me.
Yeah.
And then we had lunch after this event, and she stands up and says, "Well, I don't know if you all know." I said, "You told me not to tell anybody, so should you be telling everybody?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. And it happens. I mean, it happens all over the place. I know that everybody knows the joke, right? 3 forms of communication. You heard of the 3 forms of communication? Telephone, telegraph, telewoman. Ouch. That one might get me in trouble. And certainly, you don't want to have that. Now, college, we have a couple college students. Gossip in college is all over the place, isn't it? I mean, it's like, I mean, I went to Concordia Bronxville, so I went to, my school is a lot smaller than where you're at, and everybody knew everybody else's business, and it was not good, right? It was not good. So and that happens in the church too, right? I mean, people. There was, there seems to be this little, underground information center. Yeah, Ben.
Of course, the specifics of this really were trying to make sure that people didn't use, frankly, the force of law
Yeah.
against your neighbor. Because you went to court, when you were in judgment or something, they called witnesses. I mean, it's interesting to me that one of the crucial aspects preceding the crucifixion was the degree of false witnesses that came forward to testify against Christ in the court of the Sanhedrin to help convict him, to get what they wanted out of him.
Yeah.
And we see it all over together. There's gospel, but there are people perjuring themselves in front of courts. I mean, that's where there's a penalty for perjury.
Yeah.
In a court, but the penalty is only exacted when the perjuring apparently only applies to one direction or another. When it gets into the political arena.
Yeah.
But that's all what this is about.
Yeah.
You can't go up and testify against your neighbor.
Yeah.
Falsely.
Yep.
So that somebody else seizes their property.
Yeah.
Somebody else takes away their family, their money, their goods.
So Ben is talking about the court system where coveting or where false witnesses, very, which is true. A lot of this impacts, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Right. I mean, isn't that what we still swear that, right? We still put our hand on the Bible and swear that in a court of law.
But there seems to be no penalties.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're caught perjuring yourself or bearing false witness, you will suffer most of the time.
That's what each side, frankly, is trying to do. And so the preamble is you're under oath now.
Yeah.
And therefore there's punishment for that.
So
You want to understand that punishment is only going to be enacted if the other side can now prove that you testified
falsely.
falsely.
Yeah. So this I mean, this also ties in with swearing, right? When are we permitted to swear an oath, which is right, one of the commandments. You shall not take the Lord's name in vain. And we take an oath. I swear by God that I will tell the truth. And so we're only permitted to take that oath in a couple of places. And one is the court system, right? One you just did not too long ago, right? You stood before the Lord and said, I pledge my love to you. Right? That's an oath. That's a pledge, right? I did it when I was in the military. I got sworn into the military. So there are times when we are permitted to swear by God, right? And then the follow up of that is, if we're going to swear by God, we better be telling the truth, right? We better not be bearing false witness against our neighbor, because we're breaking two commandments when we do that, right? We're breaking a couple of commandments there. And like I said, really all of them goes back to the first commandment, right? So then we get into coveting. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his male servant or his female servant, his ox or his donkey or anything that is your neighbor. That is your neighbor's. We tend to break that one up into two, right? We talk about the spouse and then we talk about everything else. And, but, you know, certainly, and once again, right, if you're coveting your neighbor's spouse, well, that goes back to the sixth commandment, right? That goes back to you shall not commit adultery, right? If you want your neighbor's, you know, he's got the you know, a tricked out donkey that is, you know, this it's all got flames down this. Yeah. I mean, it's I'll tell you what, fastest donkey in the West, right? And you want it. Well, then that goes back to stealing, right? So these commandments are certainly intertwined, right? For a purpose. They're intertwined so that God is protecting you from you, right? I think that's probably a big part of it. Now, I mean, in today's world, we kind of embellish and talk about. I've talked to a couple of people who were their job was have a good day, play well. The Lord be with you. So I talked with a couple of people whose job, actually, I took a young lady through confirmation years ago, and her job was a headhunter, right? So she took employee A from employer A and got them a job over here in employer B. Now, is that wrong? Carl's shaking his head no. I didn't tell her that what she was doing was sinful. but there is, I mean, think about it. You're taking somebody's employee away from them. Ooh.
And
So let me.
offering them the employee switch for a better opportunity.
There it is. A better opportunity. So that's the question. By giving them a better opportunity, is that really I mean, you shall not covet your neighbor's male servant or his female servant. Yeah, you know, hey, Carl, I like the dance you're doing. This is, you know, so I struggled with this one. And I like I said, I didn't say what she was doing. And we have a member here that's what their job is. And I'm not saying that being a headhunter or being someone who takes someone from one job and gets them a job somewhere else, I'm not saying that they're doing anything wrong. There's just I mean, it's just one of those jobs where I'm like, ooh, man, it's a sticky wicket. You got a point. You got to see it. And how do we entice them away? Oh, we're going. It's a better salary, right? Okay, here and here, and then we'll go over here. Patrick.
I would be more concerned with if they're lying to the new perspective.
Yeah.
The skills of the person they're recommending. That's where I think more issues.
Yeah.
They sell what's not really.
Yeah, this is a great place to work when it's really not. And or this guy's got all kinds of talent.
Skill and talent that they really don't.
Yeah. That's a good one. Carol? Yeah. There's certainly a lot of opportunities for some shady business dealings in that. Cliff, Hunk.
shut down.
Yeah.
I got a hold of one and he got me a job.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Volkswagen, you were not working for Volkswagen and you were unemployed at the time, right? I think that might be a little different. You see though, I mean, you can see where it certainly is a little fuzzy, right? Yeah, Carl. The motivation, yeah. Yeah. Motivation. Yeah. Yeah. I think that the motivation to help the employee get a better position, better pay is all good. But in the process, there's some congregation out there that doesn't have a pastor now. Right. And that's not good. So I think maybe what I'm getting at is that pretty much every one of our decisions is fraught with some kind of, a choice between the lesser of two. Right. Yeah, Ben.
Probably everybody here, maybe not, has at one time or another heard of an opening for somebody that has the skills that
Yeah.
another person they know had. And so they advise that party that, look, they're looking for this person over here. Whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I fail to find the difference other than Carl says. The
What?
motivation
Yeah.
of somebody to be, whatever, jacking up their own commission because, okay. I
Yeah.
got this one here,
Yeah.
2 months later, I'm gonna go and place them here. That's a whole different thing. You're barely finding employment for someone that
Yeah.
exceeds the opportunities of the place where they're at. I think it's a good thing.
Well, when Pastor Reitz was retiring here, I got a phone call from a relative that will remain nameless. That is a member of the congregation currently. And he said, "You got to send a resume down here." I'm like, "Well, it doesn't quite work that way. But if you call your district president and he'll call my district president and they'll send my information down there." And so that's sort of how I got here. Right. And I'm glad that it worked out that way.
So it helps in potentially losing entity.
Yeah.
Whether it's an
Yeah.
individual, company or church or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reevaluate what they consider of the person that they may use. If they think this person is good, then they might start thinking about how do we retain
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah.
As opposed to, gee, we're going to use them.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a good thing, to give the company that lost the employee some cause to, hey, maybe we need to change what we're doing. Maybe there's some policies that maybe we can increase some salaries. Maybe we can do some things to keep those employees. Because what happens is we get employees, and for the most part, we're just status quo. We're happy everything's going along, and we don't really. Now you all have been more than generous to me and to our staff, and I keep saying that. So whenever we get like a percentage raise across the board, I get the biggest percentage of that. And I keep telling you all that if you would like, you certainly could cut mine and give to the rest of the staff a little more, because I would like to see them get. I'm satisfied with what I make. You can ask my wife, right? So we're not suffering, right?
You don't
And
have that point.
I don't have the Porsche yet, but we'll keep working at it. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with what I make, and I just want to keep our staff, happy and keep them financially viable, fit, all of those things. But wow, how did we get off that on that? But so that is coveting, right? That's coveting. Verse 18 there. Now, when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." Moses said to the people, now that's a pretty interesting phrase, right? We certainly don't want God to speak to us, or we will die, right? God's voice is, brings with it life and death, right? Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin." That's so what's the purpose of, I think there's a lot in that, right? Do not fear God. Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. Okay, so I think this is a great way to describe this. Some have said that the fear of God is like awe, right? Standing in the presence of the Almighty, that's awe. And I'm not discounting that. I think there's something to that. But the fear of God is also when your mom said to you, "Wait till your dad gets home," right? That put a little, right? That put you thought, right? So let me give you an illustration. Your mom has made, or your grandma has made, the best homemade cookies, and you love those cookies, and they are delicious. Chocolate chip, walnut, right? With or white chocolate chip with macadamia nut. Oh, so good. That thick, right? And then chewy and warm. And she puts them in the cookie jar and says, "Don't you take any cookies. If you do, you're going to have to answer to your father or your grandpa, or whatever." Now, grandpa maybe not that, yeah, he's a pushover. So, but you understand what I'm saying there, right? You get it. And so I think there's something to that idea, right? So you though you are tempted in lots of ways to grab a cookie, the test is there so that you do not sin, that you fear God, right? Do not fear, right? Do not just fear death, but for God has come to test you, that you may fear, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. So what in the catechism, we always, we should fear and love God, right? The first commandment is we should fear, love, and trust God above all things. But then the rest of them, we should fear and love God. We should fear and love God. I think there's something, so this fear is a good thing, healthy, right? If you're afraid of the one who can punish you eternally, that's healthy, right? Because then you're going, and the law is not there to make you do things by grace, right? The law is there to make you do things out of fear of punishment. That's the purpose of the law. The law is not God's grace. The law is God's punishment, right? The law is God's wrath. The law is an alien work, and it kills, right? So that then we can be ready and prepared for the gospel, right? So that we can receive the gifts that God gives. And I think that, so this is what we're talking about. So a healthy fear of the Lord helps that. And so maybe this is the problem that we have in the world in which we live. Because of sin, that healthy fear is gone. Or because maybe we've lost that healthy fear, right? I mean, do you see that in the world? That's not, I'm LGBTQ, right? Pride month, right? Jordan Peterson got banned from Twitter for saying, "I thought pride was a sin." I mean, isn't it a sin? Right? Pride goeth before the fall, right? But Pride Month, we're going to celebrate Pride. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Carl. So now you're getting into attitude, right? Which is good, right? I don't think there's a problem by saying it's both and. So certainly I don't want to go to hell. So I'm going to do what God commands. But the gospel, then I do that because God loves me and I love him back. So I think the motivation is either motivation from the law, which I don't want to go to hell, or motivation from the gospel. I love the Lord and he loves me, right? And I think those motivations are sometimes melded together, right? And it's not a bad thing. Certainly, if I'm only doing it because I'm afraid that he's going to punish me, that's not a healthy relationship. If you're afraid that your dad is going to come home and beat you all the time, that's not a healthy relationship, right? But I think having that fear in the back of your mind is also a healthy thing. That if occasionally when you do something wrong, you get a swat or whatever, right? Or you have some kind of punishment, the PlayStation is taken away for a week, whatever that may be, right? That's a healthy, those two things. So as a good Lutheran, law and gospel, they tend to go together, right? You can't have one without the other, right? They go together. And I think that's, it is amazing, I think, how our Lord is weaving the law here so that, ultimately the good news of Christ is going to reconcile these people. But God gives these people the commandments. God gives them to the Israelites so that they don't harm themselves. Their motivation, hopefully, is one of both law and gospel, right? We don't want to think that the Old Testament's all law and the New Testament's all God, because it's both. They're there in both, right? Law and gospel are there in both. The people stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. So I think they had that healthy fear, which I think is good, right? And so to me, I think that's the problem. One of the major problems in our society is we've lost that healthy fear, right? We don't believe that. Well, for the most part, there's a lot of people out there that don't even believe there is a God, much less a God that needs to be feared, right? Yeah, we're told that this God is God of love and that he loves everybody no matter what they do, right? Which I'm not denying the fact that God loves us all, but that doesn't give us freedom to do whatever we want, right? Yeah, Ben.
Our society has come a long way in separating action from consequences.
Oh, yeah.
And it has gotten to the point where it's actually saying that, well, if there's no consequence for this behavior, whatever it may be, then how do you manage to limit, alter, or change your behavior? We have places now in the country where you just will not get arrested or prosecuted unless you steal more than $1,000.
Yeah. Which is just ridiculous, right?
If you move up theft to being taking someone's property that is not yours, okay, by force, violence, or deception, and then you said, but force, violence, and deception don't matter unless it exceeds a dollar amount established here arbitrarily.
Yeah.
And even then, we may not bother to prosecute you, but we do, it'll be for minimal offenses. Then you've separated any sense of consequences. And if you've separated consequences, I hate to bring this up, but our morality, the Bible tells us law and gospel. The only reason there's a gospel is to save us from the consequences
Yeah.
of our violation of
Yeah.
the law.
Guilt and the results
We're
of
all
sin. Yeah.
guilty of violating the law.
Yeah.
And the only perfect judge says, I impose the perfect punishment.
Yeah.
And the only way I will not do that is to have the perfect substitute for that punishment.
Yeah.
And that you accept that
Yeah.
substitution. If you don't accept the substitution, then you cannot accept, you cannot remove yourself from the punishment.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben is talking about, so I'm repeating what you say a little bit because on here, I don't know whether the microphone picks it all up. So Ben is talking a little bit about consequences for our actions. So we've removed sort of the consequences of our actions. The hard part there, and I agree with you 100%. The hard part there is that we tend to think the here and now instead of the there and then, right? Our focus is worldly and not otherworldly. So someone who says, well, if the consequences are I'm gonna spend eternity in hell, then that's a long way off. I don't even think about that, right? And that's so our sinful actions have an impact eternally. We don't think that way anymore, right? And maybe they used to think that way more back in Jesus' day and afterwards, because people only lived 30 or 40 years, right? You had a short period of time in order which, hey, I could die tomorrow, right? Now we think, well, I'm going to live forever, right? And then we got a guy right here that was in hospice care and came home, right? And 10 years ago, 12 years ago, right? Maybe even longer than that. 7 years ago.
2000.
Oh, 2007. 2007. That's quite a few years ago, right? 15 years. So went into hospice. Hey, get ready. The Lord's gonna take him home, and then Margie took him home instead, right? And I think they gave him a Snickers bar. So that's what it was, right? It's like that commercial. Eat the Snickers. Hey, Harold's back. Come on home. Something like that actually happened, right? Yeah, the choir that sang to him. That could have been too. Yeah. So, but the world in which we live, well, especially in Jesus' day, I think that the eternalness or the lack thereof, right, or the suffering in eternity was much more of a right. That was the fear of eternal. The eternal fear was, I think, maybe a little bit more prevalent than it is today. I don't have an answer for how to fix that. I don't know. Certainly I don't want to run around with a bullhorn yelling at people, you're all going to hell. I don't think that's the answer, right? But, but there's the sense in which healthy fear of the Lord is a good thing. Law about altars. This is interesting. And the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the people of Israel, you have seen for yourselves that I have that I have talked with you from heaven, right? God spoke to them from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver to be with me, nor shall you make for yourselves gods of gold. An altar on earth you shall make for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. So the Lord, now we're getting into what the worship life of the people will look like. And then also, I think that's really going to be heavy in Leviticus. We've already gone over Leviticus, and Leviticus is such a wonderful book about the worship life of the children of Israel and our life as well. I think there's some wonderful pictures in there, but you get the picture here. God doesn't want any. And what was the problem in Israel many times as they would wander away? What would they do? They would bring in these into the temple or into the tabernacle. They would bring these false gods, right? They would take over a country, or they'd take over a territory. They would take over a town, and they would bring their false gods in and mingle these false gods with the God of heaven. And that usually meant that usually did not end well. So here, though, they're making an altar, right? The altar is a place of sacrifice. This altar was going to be where they were going to offer up to the Lord all the things that needed to be done for the forgiveness of sins. Your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone. For if you wield your tool on it, you profane it. And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness be not exposed. Now that's an interesting one. This was not an altar that was to be cut, but it was to be made with stones that were sort of, taken out of the ground, right? And just placed as an altar, right? An altar of earth. That's kind of an interesting one, right? So just a simple. It didn't. Probably God did not want you to make it real ornate. Like our sanctuary, very plain. That's a joke, by the way, right? Because our sanctuary is not plain; it's gorgeous. But I think the Lord wanted something simple. Now, what's the deal with don't go up the steps because your nakedness might be exposed? The Scottish kilts. So it's the Irish that were the problem, as usual. Patrick, it was the Irish that were the problem. So not that they wore kilts, but I think there's some truth to that. Now, so when I go up the steps to the altar, right, I have to lift my robe up a little bit to make sure that I don't trip up the steps. So there could have been an opportunity with the robe that they wore when they lift the robe up that they could have been exposed. And God, even God doesn't want to see your nakedness. That's pretty comforting, right? Yeah. I think that's kind of humorous, isn't it?
Is that reference back to Adam and Eve in the garden where they were like,
oh yeah,
why are you?
Yeah, could be reference back to Adam and Eve and their nakedness. God does cover them, right? Who told you they were naked? That's an interesting. I mean, well, they tried to. They covered themselves with fig leaves, but God is the one who covered them with animal skins. He actually God's the one that first kills. He kills the animals and makes clothing for them. Could have something to do with that, right? The NIV or the Lutheran Study Bible says chapter 20 marks the beginning of the Book of the Covenant, in which the Ten Commandments are explained and applied. Humans constantly run the risk of idolatry, making something or someone else God in their lives. Here, God regulates worship, helping his people to receive his word and to trust him for salvation. To worship the God of the first commandment is to worship the triune God, the Holy Trinity. And then the thing about naked says climbing steps increased exposure. The altar was to have a ramp instead. Respectful covering of one's sexual organs implied difference to the one who created man and woman. Exposure of the sexual organs was disrespectful, especially in the presence of God, who had covered humankind in Genesis 3:21. Priests were required to wear linen undergarments. So that's where the That's where the Mormons get their holy underwear from, I guess, right? Yeah. All right, we got 15, a little less than 15 minutes. Let's get on to chapter 21. Laws about slaves. And now these are the rules that you shall set before them. So this is interesting, right? How long? I mean, they've only been in the desert a short period of time, and certainly they had been slaves for some 420 years or so in Egypt. Now they go out of Egypt into the wilderness, and God's going to give them rules about slaves. That's that seems kind of odd, doesn't it? Now, these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, when you buy a brother, that's kind of, yeah. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th, he shall go out free for nothing. So there's a sense in which now this is so we talk about the Jubilee year. Isaiah talks about the year of Jubilee, which is every 50 years, right? And then here we have this idea of 6 years you serve, and the 7th year you shall go free for nothing. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons and daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door of the doorposts, and his master shall and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall be his slave forever. Now I wonder here if you have to remember the world in which they lived was a lot different than it is today. Although slaves are still sold today in some countries, but this is certainly a different time and a different era, different way of life. Slaves were, I don't know. We tend to think of slavery in a very negative context, which we should, right? Slavery is not good. But I'm sure there were slave owners that did not mistreat their slaves, but cared for them, right? Ulysses S. Grant is a prime example of that. I mean, his father was a slave owner. His father-in-law was a slave owner, and for his wedding gift, when he married when Ulysses married this man's daughter, the man gifted him a slave, and eventually Grant set him free, right? And he worked side by side with the guy, right? I mean, that was a little bit of, and I'm sure there were others like that though they might have had possession of this person in slavery, they didn't treat them poorly. And then I'm sure there were others that misused that tremendously, right? And it was a terrible thing. So certainly I'm not condoning slavery in any way, right? They had opportunity to be free. This is interesting though that I would really like to. Man, I wish there were more on this idea of if a master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. That seems kind of, I don't know whether that would be,
Weren't most of the slaves from people that they defeated in war?
I'm sure some of them were. Although this says a Hebrew slave.
Yeah.
So this is a slave of, I would wonder if maybe, so maybe this is like I don't want to make this just like an employee, but maybe there's something to that. I don't know. Yeah.
So the wife really won't be subject to working 7 years.
Yeah. I would think the wife, I think the wife would say, let's not have kids till we're free. I do like, if he becomes married, well then, and I'm certain that this has to do with, an economic situation where a person offers himself up as a slave because he's that poor. Yeah.
Something like an indentured servant.
I know a guy that was an indentured servant. Could be. Yeah, could be. Yeah. So my uncle was an indentured servant for GM. It wasn't even GM, it was Fisher Body at the time.
The time you're dealing with, and frankly, up until relatively recently, still slavery exists in Africa and Asia.
Yeah.
Some parts of South America. It exists in this country also, because there was immigrants, frankly, human trafficking.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Slavery.
Human trafficking. Yeah.
But in this time, this is an economic thing.
Yeah, it appears to be, right?
Slaves and how they treat, and it's true, they were not free to go, but for all practical purposes, this wasn't a 24/7 employment.
Yeah.
And they had to be properly fed and clothed and treated. If you read other accounts of how things happened in Rome, which is why one of them escaped. That's what you've got the whole New Testament letter of Philemon.
Yeah, yeah.
Is to say, yes, there's a certain punishment attached to here, but you're a Christian and you need to be treating this as your Christian brother, though he
Yeah.
remains a slave.
Yeah.
They're saying, okay, you've got your wife, you've got your kid, I'll set you free. But the children you have, the product of that relationship is mine. I'm the master.
Yep.
So I not only own the house where you live, the place where you sleep,
Yeah.
the food you eat, but I give you this wife for you to have your companion.
Yeah.
But the product that if it's a child is mine.
Yeah. It's almost like cattle, though. I mean, it's almost like he's treating them like cattle.
Free. She could be a slave.
Yeah.
Probably was. To be released as a slave, and then they were both free. Now, we found out after the Civil War in this country, there were tremendous unemployment problems with the slaves that were free. And so you had large numbers of them saying, I'm getting out of here, and they moved up to the main cities up in
Yeah.
the Midwest or up New York or whatever. For all practical purposes, many of them
Stayed.
became slaves to the places where they started to work. I mean,
Yeah.
these were real workshops.
Yeah.
And they worked 7 days a week, as often as 16 hours a day there, but they were free. Many stayed in the South where he said, if I got my land, they broke up the master's land, they would take their, acres and rule, and they remained free. But economically, they were in many cases worse off than they had been as slaves.
Yeah.
You can't treat a productive thing, whether it's an animal or an ox, in such a manner that it dies.
Right. Yeah. Killing. Yeah.
Rewarded because they're expensive.
Does you no good if you're going to take what is creating. Yeah. Yeah. Now the next verse, though, I mean, this is so when a man sells his daughter as a slave. Wow. Don't you just want to skip over this section of the Bible? I think we ought to just leave that until it won't be next week, but it'll be 2 weeks from now. Next week, you're going to hear about Pakistan.
Where they're slaves.
Yeah, where there are slaves. Yeah. Wow.
Verses 5 and 6 down there are interesting too.
Yeah, if she doesn't please him, or is it, where was that? Oh, you're talking about, but if
When he wants to stay
Oh, yeah.
So he can keep
Yeah.
his children.
He has to put it all through his ear. I mean, people do that today, and you know they don't even. There's nothing to do with slaves. Now you got guys wearing these big gauges and everything. I'm thinking about doing it. What do you think?
For a different reason.
Okay, should I get some gauge? I'm a slave to Jesus. Could I get some? Should I get some earrings? Judy is not a fan. I think Judy's saying no. Don't do that. Yeah, I'm not going to do that, Judy. Don't worry. Might maybe a tattoo one day, but never. So, no, I'm not going to get, I'm not going to get a tattoo either. I'm kidding. All right. Let's pick up there next time. All right. The Lord be with you. Have a great 4th of July.